going to share the link, and then you can share it. I can share it once it comes up.
Fabulous.
Which hopefully will be soon.
I've got my favourite tea today as well, which pleases me.
Oh, nice. Right, here we go. Then share the link, and then you can share it. I can share it.
Fabulous.
It comes up. I'm going to mute that.
I will apologise in advance. My dog, who is deeply in love with my partner, is crying in the background because Nick has left the house. She could at any point just start crying again, so apologies. She's not being harmed in any way. It's purely emotional turmoil.
No worries. I hope she's all right.
Oh, honestly, she's obsessed with Nick. She did snog a stranger today. Not Nick.
That's interesting.
It was really upsetting, honestly. So this very nice gentleman stopped to stroke her, and she just went straight in with her tongue. Just unreal. She's very forward. Oh, I feel like we need some like music at this point.
Yes, yeah. Perhaps we do. We need to sort that out. Oh, shite. I haven't done that right at all. I haven't done that right at all. Hold on a sec.
No such thing
as right. Get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. Move to archive. Right, let's try that again.
There we go.
That's better. Right, and then I'll put that on LinkedIn as well. Why not?
I'm just going to drink my tea.
Yeah, and that will do its thing. I didn't tag it. I should have tagged it. It doesn't matter. Okay. So that's cool. That will rock. Okay. So I guess we should probably answer the question. Oh, so welcome to anyone who's out there. Is anyone there? Does it matter? Not really, not totally, but you can now pin a message to the top of your live chat. Okay, so we can go, tell us, sorry, welcome, one and all, what the big question.
Are you posing big questions?
Yeah, does kinship mean to you? And apparently I can pin that. There you go. So that gets pinned. So there you go. So that's how we are. We're all ready and rocking and rolling and all that kind of stuff. So I'll keep my eye on this. So yeah. What does kinship mean to you, Ali? What do you think?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's an interesting use, actually. It's not a word that I hear used very often. I guess I hear the word community used more, but I think kinship is probably slightly different to community in a way. It feels more intimate. Kinship feels like a act of kindness. And also I think there's lots of kindness within community. It's more of a collective kindness rather than a specific kindness to another person. So I feel for me, kinship is a smaller version of community. It's about connecting and caring and showing compassion, kindness to another human being. Is that in any way similar to what you think?
Yeah, it is. I mean, well, you know me, Ally. I try and get specific, but then again, sometimes that leads to blind spots. I completely agree with that. I mean, you can't really disagree with it. I think for me, kinship is like a lot of things, a kind of active thing.
Yeah.
So when I looked up a definition of it, it said web of social relationships. I like that idea. I like that idea because you can do stuff with that. And I think from my point of view, there is I've been talking a lot about this concept of identity in as large a way as possible, as not grandiose, but in as broad-based way as possible. And kinship to me is a very essential element of it, because if you are connected via a web of social relationships, then your own identity can be defined through it.
Yeah.
And although identity, I mean, as we've spoken before, it hints at ego, I think kinship helps us to understand how identity can be very much rooted in community, and not just one community, but as many as possible. And sometimes, I mean, I posted something just today, and I used rather a kind of glib example on the one hand, but actually it struck me that kinship can be almost an invisible thing and a personal thing.
Yeah.
If there's someone maybe you don't even know, it may be a well-known person or something like that, and either you connect via, something that they're telling you, I don't know, it could be a show or I don't know, autobiography. I used the example of Eddie Izzard's autobiography, which I was listening to, and he there's a number of ways that I could feel akin to Eddie Izzard, but she was talking about an incident when she was younger, when she got a calculator, her very first calculator. And I remember going into a shop with my dad, and him pointing out this thing, and this was about 1974, 75. And in his case, it was 74. Sorry, in her case, forgive me. I've done it again.
No, you're trying.
Case, it's like tutoying and vouvoying or whatever in French, isn't it? You get it wrong. She was talking about this, and it was interesting because she specified the year. So for me, I was there in that time space, once again realizing that I was contemporaneous with her. She's a little bit older than me, but that doesn't really make much difference. But it was this thing about, it was a Texas Instrument calculator. And I remember my dad taking me into this shop and showing me this calculator. Now, whether it was a Texas Instruments one or not, doesn't really matter, because I remember him saying, sort of murmuring slightly sheepishly to the shopkeeper, how much is it? And the shopkeeper, and it was just a very simple, I mean, in today's terms, clearly a simple calculator, plus, minus, divide, that kind of thing, quite sizable. And I remember the shopkeeper saying 85. And so my dad calmly said, okay, thank you very much. And we walked out of the shop, and I went, 85p, Dad, that's really good. And he said, no, 85 pounds. And I was like, right, blimey. And then Eddie Izzard talks about getting a Texas Instruments calculator. And I remember my dad brought a Texas Instruments calculator back, and it was exactly the same one as she was describing. And so I kind of remember playing with this thing. And it's not the fact that it's just a calculator, it's the wonder of this new thing. kind of dawning almost, this extraordinary thing that would just work things out magically. I'd never seen a little pocket computer before.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember thinking, wow. And then, of course, you saw that my dad had brought one back that had cosines and sines and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, my God, this is astonishing. And just sharing that experience, because, again, she described it, Eddie Izzard described it with this kind of sense of wonder.
Yeah.
But not a lot of people would quite understand, because, of course, within 5-6 years, that calculator, well, certainly 10 years, that calculator would actually be worth 85p.
Yeah. And I think that's the incredible thing about technology is that now we're in this kind of tunnel now where we're speeding through, and as soon as something is released, it becomes irrelevant. It's incredible. That's a really nice, I think, symbol for the passing of time.
It's the passing of time, but also attachment, and I think, and kinship to an extent. So there's a generational type of kinship through memory, and that's what nostalgia is. Nostalgia is, if you like, a tool of kinship, and you can feel closer to people. You can feel you share a certain amount of identity with them, and you can, of course, start conversations and even become friends with people and akin with them.
Yeah.
Through that kind of connection. It can just be a memory.
Yeah.
So for me, it really is. Kinship is something that can be surprising, delightful. It can mean certainly, family, and it can suggest very much the importance of family. But not just, I think this is quite important, particularly at the moment, and particularly in lockdown, not just family as in close family, which of course is significant.
Yeah.
But also the extended family. In other words, the kin, the kinship that's built up based on these sometimes just very small incidental things that don't seem like very much.
Yeah. And I think there's a resonance, isn't there? There's a sort of a connection through another object or an experience, which is really interesting. I certainly feel that when it comes to sort of people, and I grew up my mum was an extraordinary, that's a horrible thing. She still is.
Good. I'm glad.
I mean, I say it in the past tense because it's one of my earliest memories. She was an incredible connector of people from all generations. My mum, when I was growing up, and still to this day, her friendship groups go across every single generation. When I was 11, 12, my mum had friends who were, in their 90s and ones who were just 19. She had this incredible spectrum of friends. And I remember these rich conversations that would come from that group of people coming together, and my mum was the one who brought them together. And despite all of these different experiences, there was this incredible exploration of time and culture and the way that we've been. For me, that's something I love to this day, is that, like you say, the kinship of a generation is one thing, but the kinship across generations can also be really powerful. I love having a really diverse, broad set of friends, because it challenges me and it avoids me creating an echo chamber, if you like. I like differences of opinion and different experiences. And that for me is something that is, I think, a real kind of nostalgia in itself, of seeing my mum with all of these very diverse friends. Being able to do that as an adult now is a lovely thing.
That's something we have in common, in the sense that we've definitely, I think, both have a rich, diverse set of contacts, friends throughout our lives. Some people, maybe from my point of view, at any rate, I'm not connected with currently, and that's just circumstance. But certainly quite a few that I am. And it's important to me that they are diverse. It variety, as they say, is the spice of life, but it's just very rewarding. It's a kind of part of life's education, isn't it, really?
I agree. And, it's funny because I remember, was it 15 years ago now, when I sort of started moving into the private sector with work and stuff, there was this emerging, dialogue around diversity of thought. I remember when I was at business school, like there was this huge buzzword thing going on about, or not word, buzz phrase of diversity of thought, which to begin with I thought was just a sort of slightly problematic reworking of actual diversity, but I think it could be both. But this idea that having in your team not lots of people who are just like you, but having a team full of people who are completely different is incredibly beneficial for all of the reasons. It's good for a friendship because it challenges you, it makes you think of things differently, it reflects the actual world that's around you. And I do think that the foot's been taken off the pedal a little bit with that in some businesses. I think there was a real focus on it, and now we aren't as focused on it. Certainly from what I can see in businesses, there is a desire to be diverse, but there isn't so much talk of the benefits of why that's important. Like, it's obviously in and of itself critical that we reflect the diversity of the world around us, but why is that important? It's not just a tick box exercise. It's not, don't hire more queer people because you want to get a nice mark on your diversity tick box exercise. Actually, if you want to tap into the LGBTQ market, you need an LGBTQ person.
You've got completely, and you need an LGBTQ plus person to help you to understand why it's important.
Absolutely.
And as you've said, why is crucial. And I've seen this happen actually on both, there's still sides, and this isn't cool, but I suppose that's natural enough. But both sides of this what seems to be eternal argument, but I hope won't be, of people on the side of, whether it's sympathizers, sometimes people are called, I find a bit odd, of whatever movement it happens to be. And one of the things that I find, and I understand it entirely, but one of the things I find, which is related very much to tick boxes, is this thing about you should feel that you almost uncurious about it and just say yes to whatever is happening. You have to stay curious. You have to ask why. Why are these things happening? Even why are you asking me to change my views is important. It's a brave question because it can come if you say it, and you're not originally part of a movement or a particular community, then it can bring raised eyebrows. But the important thing, as far as I can see, is to have the strength to ask the questions. Be the skeptic in everything. Be the curious person in everything, no matter where you go. Ask the questions and you'll get the answers, and people will be kind and they will treat it, the environment as that safe space, particularly the leaders. And I think that's really important. And it's almost, I'm saying this almost to kind of in a way of wishful thinking. Some leaders don't do that, but a lot do.
I think you're absolutely right. Curiosity and questioning and challenging is so important. And I think the thing is that in itself is really critical. But I think there is sometimes a propensity for people, and I've been guilty of this in the past, and I'm trying to work on that, is handing over responsibility to find out the answers to somebody else, right? So if I, for example, am curious about the Black Lives Matter movement, it's not appropriate for me to ask someone I don't have a personal relationship with, who happens to be Black, to explain the Black Lives Matter movement to me. They don't have any responsibility for my need and curiosity. And I'm perfectly able to Google that exact question and find a myriad of resources that have been written very, generously by the Black community for people like me to answer my own questions. So I think curiosity is key, but also not kind of taking all of this stuff and then going, right, you deal with it, please. Because I think,
oh yeah, or you must explain it to me.
Explain to me. Curiosity, yes, but burdening somebody else with from taking responsibility for your learning is where I think it becomes tricky.
Oh, particularly when the skepticism is patently cynicism.
Oh yeah, and I think the other thing is it's just a toll, right? So if I was responsible, for example, and I talk from my own experience, if I was responsible for explaining what queerness was to every non-queer person who had the curiosity, I'd be exhausted. So actually, I reserve that right to the people who actually I care about. Not that I wouldn't potentially care about a person who's interested, but the people I care about, I'm happy to give that time over. But if I tried to answer that question for everybody who had curiosity, I'd be exhausted. So
that's a really, really interesting and important point.
And
that
Google,
itself, right? That is good. Just Google. That's what it's there for. I mean, and in any case, it's, I know, but it might all be fake. No.
Well, trusted resources, and that's the other thing is I think, you know, when it comes to asking difficult questions or examining difficult subjects, you know, like the Black Lives Matter movement, like the trans movement, whatever it is, there are trusted resources. And one thing you should and can do is ask people for trusted resources.
Yeah.
Like you say, there is loads of crud on the internet as well. So,
well, yeah, but I think as well, go with your heart to a certain extent. And again, maybe a certain kinship can work there. So, for example, and I'm sure this person is another person who's probably tired of having to explain things, but I love cricket. I know, but someone has to. And I really love cricket. And when I was a kid, and there's a couple of things in this actually. When I was a kid, I was encouraged not to like the West Indies cricket team by a beautiful, but fairly racist mum. And as I got older, there was nothing not to admire about the West Indian cricket team, certainly as sportsmen, but mostly these days, there are some truly beautiful people, mostly commentators. They're the people who were the extraordinary bowlers or batsmen or whatever of their time. And now they're commentators on the game. And one of them, who's called Michael Holding, was talking about a couple of very specific aspects of why it was important to change your view, if you happen not to have this particular view, about the movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, and the whole issue of, well, it wasn't just, in his case, it wasn't just of sports people taking a stand.
Yeah.
It was about everybody.
Yeah.
And he had the most exquisitely eloquent things to say about it. And it wasn't just that it really did make its mark.
Yeah.
But it was mostly because of this story that I've had of growing up through that sort of phase, coming out of it and moving to a different place in terms of, you know, prejudices or influences. And then listening to this, you know, just last year from this wise and, well, whether he's wise or not is not the point. What he was saying was poignant, to the point, persuasive, interesting, and passionate, most importantly.
And this is it. And maybe this is what kinship's all about. I think I talk a lot about allyship when it comes to inclusivity. And I like the word ally. I think it's a nice word, but it feels very separate. It feels like I'm standing on the outside, sort of waving a little quiet flag, going, go on, you person, good for you, be equal. But it is separate. And I, you know, that again, lots of organizations I've worked with have had allies like network groups, and I've always wondered, is the Allies network group there because people don't want to be conflated or confused with that protected group, you know, like the LGBT and allies group, you know, so that people who aren't LGBT can join and not feel like they're being put in that pot. It's all very complex. But I think maybe kinship is a better word than allyship. Maybe we should, in, you know, the D&I discourse, we should be talking about kinship. It's about genuine emotional connection, about empathy.
Well, it puts everyone in the same place.
Yeah, but with different
ally. I mean, if you're queer, you're not an ally.
Well, I could be an ally.
And if you're ally,
do you
know what I mean? It's another group within a group.
Yeah.
But if you say kinship, then it suggests that one person could be connecting with another group and then be part of that group.
Absolutely. And rather than seeing the differences, I'm an ally, therefore I'm separate. I'm your kin. I'm there for you. I don't have exactly the same experiences for you, but I'm with you. And I think that's something that could be really powerful. And like you say, when you hear people like your cricket hero talk about something like the Black Lives Matter movement, the resonance and the impact that has on you as a white person is huge, because you feel that connect. You hear and feel that person's pain. You feel their experience and what they've been through to get to where they are. And if that's not an incentive to do better, then I don't know what is.
And the other thing, and you're absolutely right. And the other thing about that specific example is that it doesn't have to be someone being kind. They don't have to be saying, I understand what everybody says. In the end, it comes down to we're welcoming everyone, you know, that kind of thing. Basically, it doesn't have to be kind. You don't have to be saying it's all safe here, you're all okay, you know, all this kind of stuff. They're just the connection is to do with history, nostalgia, but also to see how someone has moved through their particular, you know, career as a superlative sports person, then a responsible ambassador. That is, you know, that's something to admire in itself, but it's also a connector, because it you know, if you have beliefs that essentially that kinship is a global thing, it's an all-encompassing thing, for example, then it just fits beautifully, and you feel better because of it, not because you feel that someone is directly being kind towards you, which again goes back a little bit to this thing about ego management.
Yeah,
it might be personal, you might feel personal, but you don't have to feel that it's going to benefit you in any way. No. Just that moment of, oh great, they're friends with me. No, it's much more about learning and the well, not so much pleasure of learning, but there is a pleasure attached to it, but the enrichment that you feel as a result of someone explaining something to you that hits a nerve or hits a chord or makes you feel that you understand something much better than you did.
You know what? And I think because I adore her, but Brene Brown, right? I love her. I've loved her for 10 years. She does this brilliant little spiel about the difference between empathy and sympathy, which I think is fascinating. And there's a brilliant animation on YouTube which goes along with it. And you know, she talks about how sympathy is sort of looking in at someone and go, oof, that doesn't look comfortable. Empathy is actually being there with the person, going, I get it, I've been there, and there's this real connection. And I wonder whether there's something to be said for allyship being a bit of the old sympathy, where you're sort of looking up and waving a flag from a distance going, yeah, it's great. And then kinship is more this empathetic connection of, yeah, I feel it. Like I feel your experience through your art or through your writing or through your words, whatever way that you're communicating that. Yeah, it's an interesting thought that is opening up in my head as we talk, because I think there's perhaps a little distance created by allyship, where kinship is much more an exchange of genuine human connection.
Absolutely. So just remind me, the Brené Brown thing.
Oh yeah. So if you Google, if you or search on YouTube, Brené Brown, sympathy versus empathy.
Yeah,
It's an
it's the
RA
second one
short.
down. It's the second one down.
It's so good.
And it's the RSA short, yeah?
That's it, RSA short, that's it. It's excellent. It's really simple, but it's a reminder of trying to connect with people in a sort of feeling-based way, or in a sort of slightly more kind of distant, glad I'm not in your shoes kind of way.
No, absolutely. I think it's, I think it is, these leaders are, obviously, it's great that they remind us of these things. I think sometimes it is a reminder, sometimes it's just insight, and then it's completely new.
I think, you know, the school meals fiasco, scandal, whatever you want to call it, is a really good example of how when you remove the emotion out of something, it becomes entirely problematic. So the truth of the matter is, if you look at those meals, any one of those MPs who were originally trying to stick up for it, if you ask them if that was sufficient to feed their children, they would immediately say, no, absolutely not. And what scares me is that the number of actual human hands that process would have had to have gone through, whether it was the decision makers at the corporate level, or the MPs, or the government ministers who were making the decisions about it. Even, and I know from Jack Monroe's Twitter that a lot of their staff got in contact with Jack saying this is awful. How many staff members' hands it had to go through, and somebody went, this is not okay.
Yeah,
having a human reaction to this. It's great that we're feeding kids, but it's not okay what we're feeding them. This is not acceptable. And that, for me, that's that kind of like, you know, that emotional distance that's such a problem.
It certainly is. I think sometimes I get too, it's a bit distracting maybe to get too kind of overly political about this, but it's definitely in terms of certain sides of politics, there is still a residual, maybe more than residual aspect. So moving away from paternalistic to, as again, in this particular side of the line, moving away from paternalistic to individualistic, in the sense of the classic "get on your bike." Make an effort yourself. It's up to you. You've got to make sure that you look after your family. You've got to make sure that you earn enough money. You've got, if I can do it, you can do it. That kind of 80s blue mentality, which had changed from a albeit distant but paternalistic view of leadership, which was, in retrospect, shocking. In fact, I understand it, but it was shocking in the sense that that's still there. Still, it's not stated anymore, largely because of the lack of strength of will, I think, and courage.
Yeah,
actually, because the one thing that certainly one particular politician had in the 80s, they weren't short of courage. But now it's different. It's the same sort of different in terms of the way things are put. So you're absolutely right. If that was such an important thing, and this residual thing of, well, they should look after themselves, I'm sure was there to reject things initially.
I think
I'm sure it was. And so the moment someone stood up and said, actually, that's not the point, it's just not right. And I think that wasn't necessarily the pervasive argument. In the end, it was just a strength of public opinion that did it, that got the school meals sort of sorted, if you see what I mean. What I love about what Marcus Rashford is doing at the moment, or at least him and his people, if that is what's happening, is that what he's saying is, this has not stopped. This is not something that just goes away in September.
No.
It's still here. I saw something posted 2 days ago. This is what is a 3-day meal for a family. It is not acceptable.
No.
And I think that thing, that whole question that's become this big thing, which is what you're talking about, is no longer a question of, well, they should sort themselves out beforehand for anyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's where things are. They are changing. I don't think they've changed, but I think
you're right.
the mood is changing.
Yeah, and I think this is the exciting part of social media and like Twitter. It is, yes, of course, it comes with huge problems of like mass community and a lot of very problematic behavior. But maybe this kind of kinship that's created on Twitter can be powerful, can be used for good in this way more often, where somebody, a vulnerable single mum, posts a picture of something that they've received as a handout from the government who's promising to look after them and is failing to do so, can get sufficient traction to then, I mean, transform legislation in like 24 hours. Like, I mean, obviously that's required the support of some more high profile people, but the fact that somebody sat in their kitchen, wherever they are in the country, can mobilize that much support that quickly, that's kinship. Anyone who's ever been hungry, anyone who's ever been in a situation where they don't have enough to go round is feeling that connection and going, oh, I feel that, therefore I'm compelled to act, I'm compelled to get behind this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to find that. Oh, well, there's that, which is Aldi. He's done a lot of stuff. Here we go. Right, so he's been posting pictures in the last few days.
Marcus.
Yeah, about, which are just boards or plates or whatever, just a table of, let's see if I can grab that one as a status. Just bear with me a second. So
I think he's an extraordinary example. I mean, you know, for someone like him to use his voice in and let's be honest, he's managing to walk the tightrope of not falling into political like sort of wells, if you like, which is so easy for somebody who is trying to do something good to kind of get caught up in politics. He is just stating facts and revealing them to the people who can make differences, and that's it. I mean, I think he's brilliant.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's really, and it's unique.
Yeah,
it's unique, and I think that it will set a trend. Is you'll get personalities who are only interested in stating the facts of what's going on, and they will use social media to put those facts out. So that just about everything that Marcus Rashford tweets now has nothing to do with football.
Yes.
You know,
I mean,
it's all about food poverty, and that's extraordinary, because of course it doesn't need to be about football.
But I think one of his tweets the other day was like, food stuff. Anyway, can't tweet anymore today because I've got a game later. And it's just, it's just lovely. It's really good. That's it. I think the answer to kinship is be more like Marcus Rashford, and then we'll be all right.
I think that's probably right. But don't support Manchester United, because, you know.
See, again, I leave football to my partner. She loves football. She doesn't support a team. She just supports football.
That's a marvelous thing, I have to say. That is really, really good.
It's marvelous until she's watching every single game, and she's like watching one on the iPad, one on the phone, one on the TV. Anyway,
that's crazy. That's completely crazy. I know. I sort of share that enthusiasm, although I'm sure I'm far more partisan. For no particular reason, other than there's a particular football club that I supported 35 years ago that I still support.
Well, there you go. That's commitment.
There you go. Well, sort of, not really, because I've yet to see them live after all these years. But the idea is that at some point this year, hopefully, I will, for the first time in my life. But yes, I mean, it's an interesting, but again, kinship, you know, what's the kinship thing? I've got a kinship to the northwest of England via my mum.
Yes.
And when I went to Manchester Uni, which, by the way, I went slightly reluctantly to Manchester Uni, because as far as I was concerned, I'd flunked it which is really snotty of me, actually. I flunked it. I hadn't made I'd done in those days you could do something called 7th term Oxbridge, and I flunked that. I'd flunked the 4th term as well, by the way, and I think I think Manchester was 3rd or 4th choice, something like that. But boy, am I glad I went, largely because it is the land of my mum.
There you go.
And so automatic kinship.
Yeah.
I'd been there before, not many times, but I'd been there before. I'd stayed there with a family friend, Rachel, a classic Northwestern eccentric.
Lovely.
Fabulous. And what's more, someone who worked at the Portico Library, which was a fabulous place in Manchester. I'm not sure what is still there, but it was extraordinary. It's one of these really old libraries with beautiful books.
Amazing.
Old books. And she was, I don't know, head librarian in there or something like that. Extraordinary.
What a fabulous job.
Amazing job. And so when I ended up at uni there, one of the great things is I met Northerners of my own age. I'd met loads of Northerners when I was young because, you know, family and all that. But I had never met any Northerners, really. I mean, I knew someone from school who had from Liverpool, but not got to know them. And what's more, that in a couple of cases, their families. And my friend Jed was from Liverpool. So, of course, that was only 40 miles away. So we get in a crappy old car, all of us, and go to his Christmas party. And when I say his, what I mean is his community's Christmas party. And talk about kinship. The most astonishing place, I think, one of the most astonishing places I've ever been to, certainly from the point of view of community, is a place called, God, my brain's gone.
That's unusual.
Greasby.
Right.
Greasby, which is in the Wirral. It's kind of between Birkenhead and the flowery bits of the Wirral.
Nice.
There's Lisa Tarbuck famously calls it the Leisure Peninsula, which is an area, particularly if you know Birkenhead, which is anything but. But it's sort of in the middle. So Greasby is sort of low might have been called a lower middle class area. The community is very Catholic, and as usual, most of them support Liverpool, but some of them support Everton. So there's a kind of split. But I've never been to a place where kinship is such a strong factor. So a few of us from our flat, there, Southerners and Northerners, kind of go off in the car to go to this Christmas party at the local, well, I guess, community centre, but it was, or church hall, but it was extraordinary. I mean, it was like a wedding and a half. When they do parties in that part of the world, it was just unbelievable. And again, you felt akin.
Yes.
You know, you were absorbed into this community and you were part of them. There was no qualms. They didn't look at you in a funny way and call bloody hell soft Southerners or anything like that. They just absorbed you and you just had the best time. And that's one of the things about, so for me, I have that kinship, not just with Manchester, but with other parts of the Northwest because of that, you know, the generosity of people or just them being themselves, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important part of, has become an important part of my identity.
Very important. And that's it. We are a sum of our connections, I think. So much of what we do and how we live is because of points in our life that we've been moved by things. And without that, it'd be interesting. I don't know what person I would be if I hadn't had those moments of kinship, of those moments of emotional movement, because I'm sure that those are the best parts of me in a way.
And what do you think? I mean, are there any moments that you think are kind of special moments of kinship for you? The kind of things where you did feel, well, maybe you weren't part of a group, but then you became part of a group or a movement or something, but a turning point. Is there anything you can pinpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think improv has probably been one of the more extraordinary ones. I was 20-something, very early 20s when I started doing improv, and it was something that I had touched on at school. I was a huge fan of theatre at school, and I think there were moments that I kind of flirted with the idea of doing it at university, but I was trying to be pragmatic, and instead I failed a completely different type of degree. And getting back into it was really special. because it was something that had mourned the loss of. And from my experience, theatre has been one of the most healing things I've ever done, and being part of the improv community, whatever that means. I mean, I went to New York the year before last, and I just walked into an improv theatre and got up on stage and started performing. I did it with consent, by the way. I didn't just jump on stage. Because once you're part of the improv community, no matter where you are in the world, you have, like you say, a kinship. I know that I go to New York, I go to the Pit, and I jump up on stage and we perform in a jam. That's because we're all improvisers. We have that connection, and there's something very reassuring. I now like to think that no matter where I'm in the world, I can always find refuge in either a gay bar or an improv theatre, depending on what mood I'm in.
That's fantastic. Well, that's really fantastic. So there you have a community, a kinship,
yeah,
which is global.
Yeah,
and it sounds incredibly appealing. I'm sure there are some who might think, oh my God, getting up on stage and doing things in an improvising sort of way, oh my God, that sounds really scary. But having sort of done a little bit, it's very rewarding.
Totally. And there are plenty of people who do it purely for pleasure. Like there's only show-offs like me that want to get up on stage and do it for other people. This is the great thing about improv, is that like sport, like cricket, like football, there are plenty of people who play it purely for the pleasure of it, not because they ever, want to perform in any large scale event or whatever. It's because they want to practice and explore and play and release tension, and improv is excellent for that. My new line with improv is it's like yoga for the brain. You put yourself into all sorts of different positions and see what feels good, and don't push yourself too hard. There are no mistakes and all of that stuff. Some of the principles are very, very similar.
Oh, it sounds fun. I mean, it does sound, and in fact, just as good for you, just as good for you. And I think that's a very, very positive message, isn't it? That you can have something, particularly at the moment, is that you can have something that doesn't necessarily require you either to invest in, gear,
no,
or feel physically exhausted or feel under pressure physically, to do something where, and I assume, by the way, this is an opportunity for you to share your stuff. Is there a link for stuff for us to post?
Everything I do is on my website. But I'm really excited because I've had a bit of a break over Christmas from teaching improv, and my new beginners class starts tonight, and I'm super excited.
Yay.
I love beginners groups because it's just such a fun intro to how to do improv. Not that there's any correct way of doing it.
And that's online, yeah?
It's online. Everything's on Zoom at the moment.
Yeah.
Which is great in many ways, because actually for lots of people who have caring responsibilities who can't get out of an evening, it's brilliant because they can put the bubbers to bed and then join. Or if you live far away from me, you can come and hang out with. There's no escaping me ultimately. So I've had people join my classes from all around the world, which has been really fun.
Fabulous. And just as an exercise, I suppose, if you've got a link, put it in this chat and I will transcribe it to the YouTube thing as an exercise, because there's just the two of us right now.
Look. Ooh. That should do it.
Where are we? Oh, I can't see anything. Can't see anything.
It's on the top chat on the old YouTube.
Oh, on the YouTube. It's in the YouTube. It's not refreshing, which is weird, which is odd, but that's okay. It'll appear.
Well,
it'll appear.
It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
As ever. As ever, a pleasure with mutual. It's fantastic, and we should do it again. And we'll tell more people this next time. but it's fine just to do it as a beautiful exercise. And of course, it's going to be there for people who missed it. So it should be fabulous. I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to end. So thank you all.